And we are live. Yay. Okay. You want to start? You want
Go ahead. Go ahead.
You'll make me start. Don't put me on the spot.
You're better at this.
You think so?
Yeah.
Thank you. Okay, so for tonight's bit of entertainment, we have Tom Reimer. He is the author of Malevolent Nevers and I just drew a blank. What's the name of the series?
The Glowing Trilogy.
The Glowing Trilogy.
It's the Glowing Trilogy.
Which we have not had a chance to pick up yet, but we are going to very soon. Hey, Mindy.
Suck. Hi, Mindy. Oh, and there's another thing. When we actually have the chat scrolling along the side of our screen. So when we come across a
question or a post or whatever
a comment that we we'll throw it up on the screen so that we can so you can read it and answer any questions. Hi, Nikki. Yay.
Yeah, Mindy is Mindy's a booktuber and has a wonderful booktube channel, a horror tuber mostly. She does a lot of horror stuff. So
and she writes some really good books.
Oh, right. Oh, you mean Nikki? Right. Nikki, I'm talking about Mindy.
There's too many I's in this equation.
Okay.
So, oh man. So because we haven't read the Glowing Trilogy, we're mostly going to be talking about Malevolent Nevers. Because we have read that because we actually did our homework for that bit. And you have anything to?
Yeah. How long? I mean, had you been thinking of Malevolent Nevers a long time before you wrote it?
Not too long. The Glowing took me a really long time to get that trilogy out. When that was done, because the book, I don't know how much you know, but the book is actually inspired by some sort of real events that happened in my backyard. So when that stuff was going on, there was someone who said, this could make a good horror story. And so it came out of that. And then that was written in less than a year, Malevolent Nevers.
Wow. Okay. Yeah, it's I couldn't say enough good things about Malevolent Nevers when I was reviewing it. So what? I mean, and from what I've seen, it's got great reviews from everything that I've seen.
There's a lot more buzz around it. I think than my other books. Maybe it's more traditional, like horror, whereas my trilogy is a little bit harder to sort of put in a box and label. It's a little sci-fi, it's a little horror, it's a little more YA, whereas Malevolent Nevers is pretty like gothic, folk horror, and at the same time discovered the Books of Horror community, which really brought a lot more interest to this book that I didn't have with the trilogy. So yeah, a lot of good buzz surrounding it right now.
So it's probably a pretty popular thing in a community, right? Like yours in Massachusetts.
That was it. So all of my books take place. All four of them take place in Massachusetts, different places. So the Glowing is all out in Western Mass, in the mountains, in the Berkshires, and then Malevolent Nevers takes place in Foxborough, Massachusetts, which is where I live. So it was really, there was also that sort of element as far as marketing. I was able to market it to people that live in this town. And while it's a fictionalized version, I didn't really use a lot of real names of places. I think it did really appeal to a lot of people to see their own town in a book.
Okay.
One of the things we've been talking about your book is about Malevolent Nevers is that it suits all four subgenres of the event we're doing, Horror Mayhem.
It sure did, all four.
the subgenres for this month are supernatural creatures, supernatural beings and creatures, gothic horror, cosmic horror, and folk horror.
That's all. Checks all those boxes.
It's all of them.
Every one of those boxes, yeah.
And that's fantastic. It you can't pigeonhole it at all, and I absolutely love that. So should we give like a little synopsis?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, so for those of you who I have a question to tack onto that. We have a comment that needs to be asked.
Okay.
But for those of you who haven't read Malevolent Nevers, I'll bring up the cover for me.
Yeah.
It's in a nutshell. It's about a man who is doing. I gave a great synopsis earlier. It's about a man who's attempting to make up for being an absent father for like the last 17 years of his kid's life. And while he's doing that, while all that is happening, he gets word that his great aunt is dying, actively dying. And he has to go up from Atlanta to Massachusetts to basically to be there while she's declining.
Yep.
And he discovers that he has a much bigger and much more monstrous legacy than he expected. And it's sort of in a nutshell.
Thanks, Nikki.
So is everybody hearing this okay? Just want to make sure. Okay. All right. I just want to make sure that everything's good.
So Nikki DeCaster actually asked a really good question, and I want to tack on something onto the end. Okay. And she says, I love the way that the term Malevolent Nevers rolls off your tongue. How did you come up with the title? And for people who haven't read it, the Malevolent Nevers is part of a song, sort of a nursery rhyme in the story. Yep. To add on to that, did you have a tune in mind?
I mean, not a tune. It's more of a rhyme. So no, I never really heard any music behind it. But as far as the title, it's kind of a fun, an interesting story. I actually had a completely different title for it. Pitched it to my publisher, Shadow Spark Publishing, and they thought it was too campy. Really, we went back and forth a bunch of times. I was sending them a list of titles, and we really couldn't come to agreement on any of them, and none of them really felt right, even to me, but kept throwing them out there. And then the very last one, I sent a single email with one title. I said, I think this is it. And they were like, that's it, lock it in. But there were many titles that I threw out there. It definitely was not the first by any means.
Well, as a follow-up.
The first time I never thought this one would come to light. It was Big Scaries.
I'm here for it.
Yeah, very campy. I was trying to almost basically say, like, look, this book knows what it is. I'm not hiding anything. I'm a huge fan of and inspired by old 80s like monster creature films, and it's sort of, I wanted it to sort of evoke that kind of feeling, like the feeling of walking through the video rental store and picking out, I don't know, Ghoulies or Gremlins off of the shelf. But it was a little bit too campy for the feel of this book. And I think the creatures also didn't really match the title, as you probably will agree after reading it. So
yeah,
I'm glad we did this one.
Yeah, we were discussing earlier how the book felt cinematic, and how it would make a really cool movie.
I think I heard that with The Glowing also, simply because I'm a huge fan of horror movies, especially. Yeah. And so I do write, I think, things I would want to watch. I'm watching them in my brain when I'm sleeping at night. That's a lot of my stories come from nightmares, and so I write like that.
Okay.
There's a very visual aspect to the book.
Yeah, it was very the way it was written. You might want to turn it down.
I did.
Okay, the way it was written, it was extremely easy to see what was going on. have a picture in my mind's eye of what was going on.
And then there's a there's a great scene where Simi is he's breaking holes in the plaster in the walls, which I have to tell you made my skin crawl because plaster is awful to replace.
Yep.
But I was sitting there going, he's gonna find a body. He's gonna find bodies. I just know he didn't find any bodies, and I'm terribly disappointed.
You weren't disappointed. It was cool. There
was nothing disappointing about that book.
I think one thing that was easy for me, like to describe, was that the yard, the backyard that the house, the main house, featured house was based on my own backyard. So right now I'm literally looking out on my backyard, and so I was able to write looking at what I was describing. So the house is certainly not my house. The house is completely fictional, but the backyard is. I was describing what I was looking at, so that made it a little easier.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah. Go ahead. I have something to tack onto that one too. What are some of your horror movie inspirations or your favorites?
That is a very difficult question. So generally speaking, my favorite subgenre of horror would be, I would say, at least nowadays as an adult, would be found footage horror films. I recently did a panel with Voices of the Mausoleum, which is another a horror podcast, and we talked all about found footage films. I wouldn't say as of yet found footage has inspired a lot of my writing. It will inspire. It is serving as inspiration for the next book that I'm writing right now.
Okay.
But Malevolent Nevers is more, I would say, like Gremlins, as far as the monsters, a lot of inspiration there. The Haunting of Hill House for the house itself. There are so many probably horror movies that inspire like how I describe that house.
I imagine in my mind's eye the movie from, or the house from the Haunting of Hill House.
I mean, specifically the movie. There was a really bad remake called it was just called The Haunting. I think Liam Neeson was in it.
From the early 90s.
That's the one.
Yeah. And it's terrible, but it was also like I loved it because the setting, it was still really creepy, and there's even like all those like the cherub, the faces that are carved into the walls. I feel like a little bit of that maybe leaked into Malevolent Nevers, as far as the inside of that house. But yeah, that movie, I feel like there are pieces of that in my brain left over.
See, I like The Haunting from 1963. Have you seen that version of it?
I have not seen that one.
Oh, it's great. Yeah, I'm in the minority.
There are dozens of us. Dozens.
But yeah.
One dozen.
Yeah.
I'm still part of dozens.
Yeah, we horror movies are our thing. Like we're starting a YouTube channel about horror films that should be out in the next few weeks. So
he likes his art house horror movies. I like horror movies.
I like all kinds of horror movies.
I like them all. Yeah.
Yeah, I do. I like all kinds. I watch campy stuff too. I love freaking Night of the Creeps.
Oh yeah.
In
much the same way that like I feel like there's this renaissance for horror writers and authors right now. I think there's the same sort of thing going on for like filmmakers. Like not only, I mean, there's a lot of people who are going back and rewatching things that came out in the 70s and the 80s. Now, like Shudder, you can, that streaming service, you can pretty much get any of that now really easily. But like now, I mean, the sorts of horror film, I would call them films. They're the films that are coming out right now are really different, I think, than what you saw even like 10 years ago.
Yeah, people are a lot of directors are allowing themselves to put really strange things out, and it works. You have like Witch and Midsommar, and they work.
It's a matter of time before there's a horror movie that wins Best Picture. I think it's the next 5 years, I'll say.
Yeah, the closest horror movie, or the closest thing to a horror movie that has won is The Silence of the Lambs.
Did it Get Out? Didn't it win?
No, it was nominated.
Yeah.
Oh.
Did the Shape of Water, did that win, Guillermo?
Yes, it did.
Is that a horror movie?
I guess that's technically. I guess that would be Silence of the Lambs too. I would define that as horror.
It's a crazy picture. It's psychological horror, I would call it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed The Silence of the Lambs a lot.
I don't know. I think modern day horror films just kind of suffer for the lack of George C. Scott.
Yep. Oh, sure.
The Changeling is one of her favorites.
Love that movie. Love
The
that
Exorcist Part 3, The Exorcist 3. 2 was one of the worst movies ever made, but Exorcist 3 I actually prefer to the original.
I prefer it to most. So tacking on to what Nikki asked about movie inspirations, did you have any inspirations for your creatures specifically?
Not exactly. I think when we were, so I grew up with the series Scary Stories to Tell in the Dark, and I originally had this idea like my creatures were going to be the kinds of things that you might have seen in one of those books, or on one of the covers of one of those books. And I remember what it felt like I was young, but like 3rd or 4th grade, I think, pulling one of those books off of the shelf at the school library. And I wanted people, maybe not kids, but I wanted people to have that sort of feeling when they looked at the cover, which, by the way, the cover art for Malevolent Nevers was painted by horror author Gemma Amor, who's written such books as Dear Laura and 6 Rooms, to name a few. And we talked about how we wanted this to look. It sort of it's a little bit Scary Stories. It's a little bit Goosebumps, which also is definitely inspiration for me. Goosebumps, Christopher Pike, and Scary Stories by Alvin Schwartz, all sort of inspiration. And a lot of those books are surrounding me now in this space, which is my writing space.
The cover is amazing.
Absolutely amazing. It's beautiful.
Yes.
But the best thing about Scary Stories to Read in the Dark was
it's Middle Earth. Middle Earth. That's actually my wife's map, believe it or not.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What?
It's Middle Earth. I'm excited.
Yeah, she's excited. Becky's middle name is Galadriel. So
really?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's on my birth certificate and everything.
Your parents really into Lord of the Rings.
My mother was reading the book as she was pregnant with me, and she's like, "Hey, that's a great name." So it was either Galadriel or Arwen. I'm glad I got Galadriel, because Arwen is kind of difficult for me to say.
Galadriel is perfect.
Yeah, cool name.
But yeah, I get unreasonably excited.
Much better than Frodo or Saruman. That would have been a rough one.
That would have made high school difficult.
Yeah.
But let's see.
But yeah, we are huge fans of horror films as well. Just love them. I'm big on Italian horror films.
Oh, yeah. That's one genre I would say I've not seen very many Italian horror films.
They're an acquired taste.
Yes, I understand.
Yeah, very, very much so.
Hey, Kelly, The Sixth Sense was nominated a while back. You're right. That's a great one.
Yeah, I love The Sixth Sense.
Yeah.
That was, I think, was it his best film? I think it probably was.
Oh, M. Night, yeah.
M. Night Shyamalan.
Yeah. I mean,
we're going to argue about this.
I loved The Village until the end, but I love The Village. As far as like the ambiance and the ethereal sort of, I don't know, I loved it. But Sixth Sense probably on the whole is probably the best.
Okay, yeah. Becky's a big M. Night Shyamalan apologist.
I am.
Oh,
but I love Signs.
Okay.
I love The Sixth Sense. I love The Village. I even love Lady in the Water, as weird as it is.
That's weird. Yeah.
Yeah, but the Happening was a freaking turd. I mean, come on.
I did not see that one.
He can't get past Mark Wahlberg.
Mark Wahlberg is so bad.
It wasn't a good movie, but Mark Wahlberg makes it infinitely worse.
I cannot apologize. He's from this area, but I will not apologize.
Yeah, he is from that area. That's right.
He is.
Nikki's asking my questions because I've actually got that one written down. What's your writing process for Malevolent Nevers? Do you have a routine?
I do. I am a plotter. I plot out every single chapter. I know everything that's going to happen. I'm not somebody who flies by the seat of my pants and just sort of figures it out as I go. I mean, I have the chapter numbers. I know especially my books, the POV tends to change from one chapter to the next. For Malevolent Nevers, it's just the two of them. It was Abe and Simi back and forth. And so I literally had all 50 some chapters plotted out before I started writing. And then it's more just like fill in the blank or, color between the numbers sort of thing. So I prefer to write that way, and I can actually get the story out faster.
Do your characters ever take off with you? Since you have it plotted out so meticulously, do your characters ever pull like crap on you? Does it ever happen that way?
Sometimes, yeah. There's definitely stuff that I did not think was going to happen. Scenes that went differently. I would say, generally speaking, the plot doesn't alter or change a lot, but individual scenes, some side characters who maybe I didn't really flesh out, because I don't flesh a lot out in the outline. It is really a skeleton sort of thing. Some of those side characters really come to life when I'm writing, but for the most part, it does stay as exactly. I mean, sometimes I'll even write down in the outline specific, some specific dialogue. And so it's already there, and I just write it in as I'm going. Yeah.
I forgot what I was going to say, but did you have many drafts or?
There are a lot of rounds of revision, I would say, with back and forth with my publisher, Shadow Spark Publishing. I think as far as just myself, I probably had 2 or 3 drafts, but then between sending it back and forth between them, probably 3 more. So 5 or 6 total. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Nikki, don't stop. You're far more interesting than I am. Yeah. When we were talking to Nikki, she said some of her characters tended to run away with her, and do ridiculous things.
I think that happens more in The Glowing. So if you haven't read that yet, The Glowing is. There are a lot of characters. It's the kind of book that you don't know as you're reading. Okay, every chapter, whose perspective is this one going to be from? And in that series, there are definitely characters that went, especially over the course of 3 books. I don't have 3 books plotted. I did not have 3 books plotted out at the beginning. I just had 1. And it wasn't until after that first book was even published and written that I wrote that I planned the next 2. I think I generally had an idea of what was going to happen, but those characters, they took some big leaps that I did not anticipate.
Oh, good. That's fun.
Yeah. And I was going to ask, have you ever read anything by Michael McDowell?
I right now am reading The Elementals.
That's my favorite horror book of all time.
I am reading that right now. I probably 20 pages left. And I love it. I guess he wrote the screenplay for Beetlejuice.
Yeah, that's what he's known the most for. But
did he really?
He did, yeah. And something else pretty. On Nightmare Before Christmas, also, I believe.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Yeah,
I think I may be wrong there. Definitely Beetlejuice. I might be wrong. Before Christmas. I have to check. But yeah, I definitely see Beetlejuice in it. Like when I'm some of the characters are like these caricatures. And even like one of the main characters, her name, or the teenage girl, is very similar to Lydia Dietz and in Beetlejuice.
Yes, she is. Yes.
Yeah. She's but I love it. His style is really, really different. Even just like how his characters speak. I'm not sure like that there probably are people that talk like that, but it just works. It's really, really different.
He is so incredibly gothic. His atmosphere. I mean, you know, with the houses, the 3 houses, and so cool. Yeah, that's my favorite. But the reason I asked, I wondered if you had read that before.
No,
not that it's even similar, but that gothic feel is something I think I would have serious problems with.
I was trying to say to Nikki, big influence on my childhood too. There's going to be a second Beetlejuice coming out at some point with both Michael Keaton and Winona Ryder. Yeah,
I'm here for it.
Oh, I wonder if it'll have Gina Davis. She's just kind of fallen off the map.
Yeah, where is she? Yeah, because she was in something I saw recently.
She's in a TV show, a really popular TV show recently.
Glow. She was in Glow.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So you're reading Michael McDowell right now. Who are your literary influences? Like, who do you read?
Okay. So just as far as my interest in horror, I would definitely say R.L. Stine, Christopher Pike. So I started reading horror really young. And so those are probably middle grade into YA territory. And I was reading those in the 3rd and the 4th grade. So probably shouldn't have been. But Christopher Pike, R.L. Stine, Alvin Schwartz, L.J. Smith, who did, there was a series called The Forbidden Game, which I ate those up. That was sort of more vampire than anything. And then I got so that was like the gateway drug to Stephen King and Dean Koontz, which, hi Jennifer, which I had like access to a lot of Stephen King, especially growing up, as my dad just had like a bookshelf filled with horror. At the same time, there's also a very complete, at the time, set of Robert Jordan's The Wheel of Time series, which I started reading in like middle school. Before, like now it's kind of weird to see that's like really popular, but that has influence on me more in like, especially in The Glowing, how I wrote the scenes from one perspective to the next. I don't really see myself really reading a lot of fantasy nowadays or writing a lot of fantasy. I'm pretty strictly writing horror. Beetlejuice too, Nikki. Yeah. I would say
she's
also,
fangirling out in the comments.
Yeah, all the Keaton. Let's see what else would be big influence for me. Literally, the biggest influence for, I would say, most horror writers, you have to talk about like Mary Shelley and Frankenstein and Bram Stoker, Dracula. I read those at a really young age as well. You're not getting much more gothic. Edgar Allan Poe, for sure. But I would say the most like obvious influences for me were from a really young age, and it would be Goosebumps. Like I remember buying like one of the first paperbacks I got to go to the store, like a chapter books, was One Day at Horrorland, which was an R.L. Stine book. It's the first one I ever owned. And those books were so cool to own. You could actually feel the texture on the word Goosebumps, and all the cover art was awesome. And that's what I wanted for this feel. Like I wasn't writing a book for for a middle grade book, but I wanted that same sort of like, oh my God, I got to have that book.
Yeah.
But I had that feeling when I was a kid.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite. It's one of my favorite covers in quite a while. I just love it. It's great.
So Gemma Amor did the artwork, and then the design was Jessica Moon from Shadowspark Publishing, who's one of my pictures. Yeah.
So one of my very, very favorite things about Malevolent Nevers is the characters. You have Abe, who the absentee father, who's just come back on the scene. You have Simi, his 17-year-old son, who's thoroughly not happy with the situation. You have Simi's girlfriend, Mags,
who was a great character, by the way. Mags was awesome.
I just wanted to pick her up and put her in my pocket. And you have Daisy, who is sort of Abe's ex, who is not very happy with Abe, but she's dealing with it the best she can. And the reason I mention this is you have great characters, and they interact with each other very, very well. As I mentioned before, Abe and Simi have a very rocky relationship. And usually with books like that, I'm ready to just smack the teenage kid upside the head because they're always unreasonable, just always. But you somehow managed to make both characters perfectly reasonable and understandable. And I didn't want to smack anybody. And Nikki asked this question, what sort of ties in? He says, is there an aspect of writing love, like dialogue or description, what you loathe? You have a very, very strong hand in description and dialogue, so I'm dying to know.
I would say I love writing dialogue. So much so that I have to there's sometimes I'll write a scene, I'll be like, oh my God, I didn't describe anything. I would say that requires more work. We're describing what I'm looking at, or what the reader is supposed to be seeing. Sometimes I'll write a whole chapter and I'll realize I didn't describe anything. Nobody know. I'll introduce a character and I did not describe what they look like. I don't care too much about that. Sometimes I think sometimes I don't feel like I need to completely, paint the character. I think you can do a little bit of that on your own, or the reader can in their mind. But I write. I love dialogue. I think I can tell a lot about a character through what they're saying to other people. I do a lot of inner dialogue as well, which I really like, to sort of break up a scene. So I would say I prefer, and it comes with much more ease, to be writing dialogue for sure.
Okay.
So,
and here's
Matt.
Here's Matt. Hey. Matt's one of the best booktubers out there. So
nice to meet you, Matt.
And he's the paperback junkie. If you ever get a chance to watch,
Matt, I am in my basement right now, and I'm surrounded by old horror paperbacks, or paperbacks from hell, I guess is what we're calling them nowadays. But
yeah, Matt,
we're calling them that.
Matt's got a great collection of horror and sci-fi. He's got a lot of old pulps and things like that that are just beautiful. Yeah, and Matt got me back into reading pulps. I love a good pulp fiction novel, and so we're gonna. But yeah, he got me back into that. So great booktuber.
That's a pretty good question. Who is your target audience?
No, Malevolent Nevers is aimed at an adult audience. There are teenagers in it, but unlike the Glowing Trilogy, which I would say borders on YA, Malevolent Nevers does not. It's written for adults. But I love the feel of that. I just wanted the cover to have that sort of same feel. Even though, because I think adults can get really excited about a cover too, just like a kid might. So that's.
Especially the adults who read the Fear Street books and the Goosebumps books,
who are a lot of them are my age. Yeah, so
I think I'm a little older, and I want to read Goosebumps now. Whereas they were not available when I was that age. I'm older than Becky. I'm older than you, so that they weren't available then. And I went from reading Hardy Boys to reading Pet Sematary when I was 11 years old or so. And but that was just the way it had to be done back then, because it was either jump from you had to jump from Hardy Boys to adult books because that's what was available. I wish Goosebumps had been available at that point.
Yeah, I went from the Fear Street books to the Belgariad. That's kind of strange jump, but
but yeah, we're one of the next things I want to do is to, if you haven't read Malevolent Nevers, please do it, because my goodness, it was so compulsively readable. It was so easy to read. It's like it's kind of what we said to Nikki. There was not one point in that book where I wanted to say, just move on, go somewhere else. Because in most novels, especially novels that are 300 pages plus, 400 pages, you're wanting things to hurry up and move along. At one point or another in the book. We never had that. Like I said, it's compulsively readable. It's just really easy to turn the pages, and unfortunately, that's not the way it is with 90% of books.
I think I do write books that I would like to read, and I like the feeling of getting a book done with. It's more satisfying if I'm not sitting with it for like a month, reading it. And this is definitely not a novella, but I love the feel of reading a novella. It takes me a very short period of time to get through it, and I wanted this to move. And my trilogy, those books are even snappier. They move like, if you thought this was fast, those books fly.
You're in for a good time, Kelly.
Yeah, very cool.
Thank you, Kelly.
Yeah, awesome.
Short stories and novellas are my jam right now. I read a lot of romance and horror and all of that right now, and I'm thriving on the short stories. But Malevolent Nevers is not a short story; it's a full-length novel. But for everybody who's taken part in Horror Mayhem, it will fit every single one of the prompts. So have at it. Tell us what you think. Because we loved it.
Yeah, we did. But yeah, compulsively readable is just the perfect description in my opinion.
Yeah, I think I told you before I inhaled that book.
That's the best thing you can tell a writer. Like, just amazing.
I had it read in 2 days.
Oh, it's awesome.
Yeah, you did. It took me 3, I think, but I had we just had a great. Well, no, I started it, and then I started it at the end of last month, and then unfortunately I got 100 pages in and had to stop because I had so much to read for week 1 of Horror Mayhem, and then I picked it up last week and just sped right through it. But yeah,
smashed it.
Yeah.
This is a question I like to ask all of the authors we interview. What's your favorite book?
Whew, that changes all the time. That's one of the most challenging questions you could ask me. I've answered it differently many times. At times I've said The Stand, Stephen King. I've said The Catcher in the Rye. The character of Holden Caulfield and his voice. As I said, I love to write dialogue. Voice is really important to me, and so there have been times where I felt like that was one of my favorite books that I had ever read. I mean, the Lord of the Rings trilogy, the first book in the Wheel of Time series, Eye of the World, Robert Jordan, one of my favorites of all time. I've read that book probably more than I've read any other book. It's not horror, which would definitely be my genre. One Day at Horrorland, the first real, I would say, horror chapter book I ever read by R.L. Stine. I don't think I could pick though. I as a former English teacher. I loved teaching Lord of the Flies, William Golding. So, I mean, and then nowadays though, I mean, I'm reading so many I'm being introduced to so many new things that I cannot believe were not available to me years ago. The indie horror community. I'm reading like Gemma Moore's stuff is just amazing. I highly recommend some of her work. I can't pick a favorite though.
Yeah, I've got it written down. Gemma Moore.
Yeah.
We're gonna check her out. So what do you have in the works right now? You were talking about you might be writing a second book.
Well, no, I don't know if it's a second book, but
no.
I am writing a book. It's not connected to Malevolent Nevers though.
Okay.
I'm not ready. I can't say the title yet, but there is a title. I am under contract for a book that will be out in February of 2023. So that'll be my 5th book. And there's Eye of the World. Love it, Laverne. One of my favorites of all time. So this book that I'm writing now, it's lit up, Nikki, I know, is inspired largely, as I said earlier, by the found footage subgenre.
Awesome.
Is it horror?
It is definitely horror. There are some similar elements as far as folk horror and local sort of myth. This one again will be set in Massachusetts in a completely different town, like a real town, but a fictionalized version of a real town in Massachusetts. Definitely a creature feature sort of vibe to it again. And I don't want to say too much more. It's going to be 2 POVs again, but very different than any either. It's not going to be a father and son relationship. And I'm just trying to say stuff about it without saying too much about it.
But I'm excited. You have a horror novel in the works. I'm here for it.
Yeah. Will it be ready by this time next year, you think, or?
Yeah, February 2023. Because I'm booked to attend the Scares That Care AuthorCon #2. I have a table at that event, which is in May or the end of April, beginning of May 2023, and so or at the end of March, beginning of April, something like that. So like a month earlier, this book comes out, and that'll probably be the first time I sign any copies of it. So that timing was intentional.
Awesome, yeah, because we'll be having this event next year too. So maybe you'd come back and talk to us again. That would be awesome.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I hope between now and then people keep reading Malevolent Nevers. It's definitely not connected in any way, the 2 books, but I like to think that my books all sort of take place in the same universe. So a hint at things, even in Malevolent Nevers, they're little Easter eggs for anybody who happened to have read The Glowing, which we're not nearly as many people that are reading the Malevolent Nevers. Far fewer people have read the Glowing trilogy, but there are Easter eggs for anyone who's paying attention.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, we're definitely going to be reading the Glowing very soon. Unfortunately, I have to wait till after May because we have so much in the works. But yeah, we are.
You do need to wear that. That would be. I feel like you could have something personal made for that, Nikki.
I feel like it would be very, very well received. You were saying when we were talking to you before we started the live, you were saying you wrote all of your books during the time of the pandemic.
Yeah, so they all came out during the pandemic.
They came out during
the first Glowing was written almost a decade ago, but then just sat, and it was never published until 2020. And the next 2 books came out very quickly all 3 of them were published during the pandemic. and then also Malevolent Never. So 4 books during the pandemic. There was a lot to do sitting around the house. So
yeah. No kidding. Did you try to take the pandemic, what was happening in the world right now, into account when you wrote your book, or you just sort of disregarded altogether?
No, I think for me, it was it was a really awful sort of few years, and so writing was a great escape from that, as is like reading for me, as is for a lot of people. And so it was like a time I didn't want to be thinking about the pandemic. So yeah, my books do not take place. There's a lot of really other awful stuff that's going on in my stories, but not a worldwide pandemic. And I feel like I may never write a book about a worldwide pandemic.
It kind of sucked to run from creatures while wearing a mask.
Yeah. That's for sure.
This is too much to take into account.
Mm-hmm.
You said you were what kind of Gothic literature have you read? I know you said you've read Frankenstein and you've read Dracula and you're reading Michael McDowell. Are there any others like?
Yeah, so I would say James Herbert, the British author who wrote what is it? I have it right here: Haunted and Shrine.
And the Rats.
Yep, and I haven't read Rats. I've read Haunted and Shrine. Haunted is like real Gothic horror. Shrine, they just made into. There's a movie that came out recently. It was not called Shrine. It was called The Unholy. It was actually filmed here in Massachusetts, and that's based on James Herbert book Shrine. So I'd say that's more recent Gothic horror that I've read. What would you recommend?
Well, you said you have read Edgar Allan Poe. I read The Fall of the House of Usher. Just this month. It's for the third time that I've read it. It's really good. But what about H.P. Lovecraft? Have you read any Lovecraft?
I have not read H.P. Lovecraft. I feel like
I've only read one by him. I understand. I'm an English major too.
Yeah.
Yeah. Becky has 2 English degrees, and
H.P. Lovecraft is a blind spot.
Yeah, H.P. Lovecraft but he is for a lot of people. I mean, people have heard horror stories about H.P. Lovecraft, and a lot of them are true.
Yeah, I mean, I think that maybe that sort of stigma, I don't know, it's in the back of my brain. Maybe it's why I never quite got to reading his stuff. I'm not 100% sure that's why, but it could be.
Yeah, I mean, it's the thing is, it's so obvious in his stories.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's so obvious and so upfront that it eventually becomes the norm when people are reading it, and they just kind of look past it. I do have trouble with that in a lot of his stuff, but it's not there. It's not there in every story.
For those of you that don't know, H.P. Lovecraft was widely known to be a raging racist.
Yeah.
Yeah, and sure, it was the 1920s. Things like that, but there were a hell of a lot of people back in the 1920s that were not racist.
Sure,
right? I mean,
it definitely does. I feel like I can avoid reading his work, and it won't take anything away from my love of the horror genre if I have to miss out on what he's written. I'm okay with that.
Yeah, sure.
I'm actually gonna read one of his stories this coming week, simply because he's like the king of cosmic horror.
That's true. Yeah.
And I have to get something in there.
Yeah. We discovered Algernon Blackwood this month as well, who is an amazing horror writer from the late 19th and early 20th centuries, and I love his stuff, and so I would definitely recommend Algernon Blackwood if you haven't read any.
Oh, I haven't read his either. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, he does folk stories. It's mostly short stories, folk stories, gothic stuff. You need to move, but yeah, it's it is really great stuff. So, you said you liked strange things. Did you like The Witch and Midsommar and movies like that? Because it divided.
The Witch. I did like The Witch, but also I live in an area of the country that's you see a lot. This is a really old part of the country, so like the footprints of colonial America, you see it everywhere in Massachusetts, and so I've always been interested in sort of that time period, and so The Witch just kind of I was drawn to it for those sorts of reasons. I think Midsommar I have not seen, and it is because I watched his first movie Hereditary, which I hated.
Okay.
I may go as far as to say that is my least favorite movie I have ever seen. Would be Hereditary. It was and I watch a lot of horror, but there's just one scene in that movie, and if you've seen it, you know what I'm talking about. And it was too much even for me. So
okay.
Yeah, and so
I
think I can skip Midsommar. And maybe that's completely unfair, and maybe I know a lot of people say a lot of great things about that, but I just disliked Hereditary so much.
Well, Hereditary and likewise Midsommar, they're very, very divisive. You either really love those movies or you hate those movies.
Yep.
I haven't met anyone who's like, yeah, they're pretty good, and just move on.
Well, I think there are some scenes in Midsommar that would rival that scene in Hereditary in disturbing aspects and really tough feelings to have while watching a movie. But
he wants to know who wrote my blurb. So I wrote it. That my publishers tweaked it a little bit, but that one I wrote.
Yeah.
I'll read it.
Want me to read it? I don't know that I have it.
You want me to read it?
Read it. Sure. Let's do it.
All right. 'Tis thy turn. Abel Ward just wants to reconnect with his son. After having been a ghost for 17 years, he's returned and trying to be a parent again. He doesn't want to mess it up. If only he knew where to start. Here they wait for all our evers. Simi Ward wants his dad to leave him alone. He's happy just hanging with his girlfriend Mags, and though Abel's trying, it's far too late. Sometimes you really can't make up for lost time. Our demons to bear. And when a mysterious midnight call summons them both to an old family estate in New England, neither could have expected what would be lying in wait. An ancient evil so rooted in the story of their ancestors, it'd be impossible to dig up. Our demons to share. Will the secret remain buried, or will Simi and Abel finally learn the truth? Does knowing the truth do anything to stop the evil from spreading? Sometimes they be locked away where no one can see them outer sight. Sometimes they be a drooling face staring in through your window in the dead of night. And that is part of the nursery rhyme that is featured heavily in the book.
I love that nursery rhyme.
Yeah,
it's so creepy.
We did. It was creepy. Did it take you a while to come up with that, or did you come up with it in small pieces? The nursery rhyme.
I did it really quickly. I think I wrote that like in one sitting.
Wow.
So Kelly says, "Do I incorporate a lot of Massachusetts history?" Yeah, I mean, in every one of my stories takes place in Massachusetts. There's definitely a historical element in most of it. Not so much the glowing. The glowing is more just based in it's more sci-fi, so it's actually more futuristic, if anything. But absolutely. So Malevolent Nevers takes place in Foxborough, home of the New England Patriots. And the glowing takes place out in the Berkshires, out in the Berkshire Mountains. My next book will take place in a small town in Massachusetts called Stowe, which is right in the heart of, right near, if you're familiar, Lexington and Concord, where the Revolutionary War started. So there definitely will be a heavy historical element in this next book that I'm currently writing.
Great. Yeah, if I'd have thought about it, I'd have worn my New England Patriots t-shirt.
It's okay.
Yeah, yeah. We we would love to live in somewhere in New England, Vermont, Massachusetts, Maine, even Maine. We would love to live in that area. So
somewhere that actually has seasons.
Folk tales. For Kelly wants to know if there's any folk tales from Massachusetts. Well, I mean, I don't know if this doesn't really count as a folk tale, but like obviously the Lizzie Borden house in Fall River, everyone's heard of that. The Haunting of Hill House is based on, well, we don't know for sure, but a couple of different properties in Massachusetts. It's probably based on one of those homes, not too far from where I'm sitting right now. So I mean that's the most of all haunted house books. Shirley Jackson's The Haunting of Hill House has got to be number one. I mean it's pretty big. Folk tales, there's no real like cryptids, not specific. I'm probably blanking on something. There's entire books written on this, so I'm probably wrong, but I can't think of any on the spot.
She makes a good point. Just so you know, Nikki, that's also really, really heavy Southern English too.
Yeah, Winder and Minner
and Warder.
Yeah.
Time to do the wash.
There's a little bit of so that's one thing. Yeah, New English. Okay, we'll call it that. There's even some. Well, without spoiling too much, there are certain characters that maybe speak with a little bit of colonial dialect, colonial era dialect in the book as well.
Yeah. That part was very interesting to me because
that's right, Roanoke. Yeah.
I think it made I think the language of the nursery rhyme made it even more creepy.
Made it believable, honestly.
Yeah, because that is one thing that was in your book that we don't get a whole lot of with mainstream horror these days, and that's the creep factor. It was creepy and just downright scary sometimes.
I sort of feel like things that are not supposed to be scary, like things for children, often if you sort of take those things and put them into certain spaces like clowns or nursery rhymes, they're almost scarier than other things, I think.
Yeah,
there's a creepy clown aspect.
I mean, in nursery rhymes, so many of those were written to like scare children, like back in the day. Even like the old fairy tales, like Hans Christian Andersen and some of those, like horrific sort of. And if you actually read the real stories, it's not like the Little Mermaid that Disney has fed us.
That's for sure.
Yeah, far more horrible. Yeah.
Well, Peter Pan in the original Grimm fairy tales killed the boys from Neverland.
Oh yeah, yep.
The Lost Boys. So very interesting how they, come to be what they are these days.
Yeah, the Little Mermaid was told she'd have to kill the prince.
Yeah,
if she wanted to get back her life. That's
when I remember was particularly gruesome, if I can recall the original Little Mermaid. Yeah. So yes, nursery rhymes are they're already their own sort of scary thing. And then of course clowns and dolls and inanimate. As you said, you had this fear of inanimate, like dolls and toys, right? Is that what you said?
Yeah, animated inanimate objects, things that move. You were mentioning earlier, talking about the movie movie Haunted.
Yeah.
The
Haunting. Yeah.
The Liam Neeson movie.
Yep.
I love that movie. I'm just saying, but there's a really heavy creep factor in that movie with the sheriffs that move around and that their faces turn towards the main character. I'm like, nope, we don't need no more of that. That actually happens sort of in your book at one point. There's one scene that really creeped me out, and it was not even important to the main plot line, where Simi, the teenager, is looking out across the street, and there's a scarecrow that just I don't know. It just, the whole scene just creeped me out, and I'm like, I have to put this book down for a second.
Yep. Yeah, nothing really comes of that, right? But it's still,
yeah. But I totally expected it to.
Yeah.
I was absolutely totally expecting him to wake up one night and the scarecrow is in the corner of his room or something.
Yeah. Well, it was
scary stories to read in the dark too much, I think.
It was a good foreboding scene though. And it added a lot. So yeah, great scene.
You know what else inspired me growing up? It's sort of like on this note would be what was it? Are You Afraid of the Dark? Growing up was like kids like me who just wanted to be scared at a young age, but maybe I was too young to rent like Nightmare on Elm Street or things like that. Are You Afraid of the Dark, which was just on Nickelodeon a little bit later in the day, was like the best thing ever.
I loved that show.
Those are always creepy, Nikki. Yes. No matter what.
I've never read this book. Book by Mary. I've never read it.
Never read that. Yeah. There's some, middle grade and YA books that are really that are really creepy for sure.
That is absolutely true. That's exactly what the Scarecrow did in that book. It just creeped me out basically. So I'm totally on edge for whatever's coming next time. It works.
Lots of red herring. Even in Malevolent Nevers, Nikki. Lots of red herrings. That's just one of them. Hi, Paul.
Hi, Paul.
Yeah, Paul.
James in the paranormal.
Yep. Paul's another booktuber. He's a paranormal tuber. Plays games on his channel. He does quite a bit of things over there. He's got a really good channel. He's been around Booktube and YouTube for a long time.
Welcome.
Yeah, a lot longer than we have been. But can you explain a little bit about what the Glowing Trilogy is? What it is about?
So there's 3 books, and we wanted to we numbered them as if it was like a sort of a campy sci-fi movie series almost. So you have like the Glowing 1, the Glowing 2, and then the Glowing 3. And basically, so this, I would say, I was another sort of big inspiration for me growing up. What my favorite movie I used to say as a kid was The Goonies. And so it definitely has that sort of like, that sort of, I've heard some people say like Stranger Things, a bunch of teenagers and it's sort of a quirky bunch of kids, a nerdy group of kids who go up to the top of an actual mountain, Mount Greylock, which is the highest peak in Massachusetts, to watch basically a meteor shower that's going to happen. And instead of a meteor shower, basically aliens descend and destroy most of the planet. And they're basically these survivors, this group of teenagers and their teacher that need to sort of navigate this new world that is teeming with these extraterrestrial beings, like really barbaric creatures. And so, it has a sort of like epic feel, and that they get split up, and you're watching different sort of their stories take place. So it starts there, book 1, and there's three books worth of it. I think that's it. I don't know that there'll ever be a 4th in that series.
Okay.
That's sort of Night of the Comet vibes. Sounds like.
Yep. Absolutely.
I like it.
Yeah, cool.
We'll have to read it.
Yeah, we are. We're going to have to read that. Which we will once May is over, and possibly June, because there's a big event coming up where we're reading westerns as well. So
okay.
Yeah. We and if you see us looking out the window, there are some big scary clouds out there right now. So that's what we're looking at.
Are you expecting some weather?
No. We're like not supposed to get rain at all for like the next 12 years. It's like the apocalypse outside the window. I'm like, we should probably run for. Do we climb under the house or something?
But are you going to work with the same publisher for your next novel as well?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. So my 5th book will be published by Shadow Spark Publishing. Yep.
Okay.
I like they're wonderful. It's very personal. They get to know all their authors. We have a lot of creative freedom. They want us to write what we want to write. And
awesome.
when you're not having to deal with one of the big trad publishers, you know, and maybe the number of books you sell isn't the only thing that's important. It's really refreshing, and they work really well with me, and I really enjoy the experience. So I kind of like having all my books in one place. So
and you don't have to sell quite as many books to make the same amount of money either, do you? I mean,
no, but you know, I feel like we get a pretty good cut. But yeah, there's not as many people involved, so you don't have to, you know, you're not paying all these different people. It's the small publishing house and myself. So I think the royalties percentage wise are maybe not selling quite as many books, but the percentage is probably higher as far as the royalties.
Right.
Yeah, I agree, Nikki. It's not always the case though. But I mean, indie publishing is a relatively new avenue for a lot of people, and especially like indie houses. So I feel like it's definitely a doorway for people who, like I said, The Glowing sat around for a decade, untouched, and I literally one day was like pulled it out of a drawer, you know, on a flash drive and said, let's see if anybody be interested in it now. And sure enough, that was my, you know, entrance back into the publishing world.
Cool. I know Nikki was saying in her her interview that we did with her that she never even shopped traditional publishers.
Yeah.
Just released it that way, and I'm hearing more and more authors doing that. They just don't even worry about the trad publishing.
Now I wouldn't. I mean, so many people, especially in the horror genre, are having amazing success. You know, with indie houses and small presses, and it almost feels like that's a better fit for this genre in a lot of ways. Anyway, sure, there are definitely people who write horror who are writing for big publishers, but I think there's just as many, if not more, who are writing for these small houses and maybe writing more of what they want to write. So it's definitely an avenue for a lot of people. Myself,
I think that's the big thing. I will compare it to the movie genre. You got guys like Guillermo del Toro, who now is pretty well able to put whatever he wants on screen.
Yep.
But there was a time when he made a movie called Mimic. I don't know if anybody remembers that. It's
not the one like the subway, right?
It is.
Loved it.
Yeah, but he didn't get to put what he wanted on screen. The second half of the movie was pretty well directed by somebody else because they did not like what he directed.
Didn't know that. And
so mainstream publishing, we don't know how much of that is actually the writer anymore. You know, sure, the main idea is the writer and most of the writing, but who knows what is the you know actually came out of the writer's brain and what was pulled out of somebody's butt at the publishing company. We just don't know. And
that's very cool, Kelly, by the way.
It's extremely cool.
Yeah, I like that movie a lot. I liked Mimic.
Oh yeah,
I own it on Blu-ray. That was the second Blu-ray I ever bought, I think.
Oh, Small World. Wow.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah. I used to work with a lady who was her brother was this huge television star, and I was like, man, and I've watched this guy for years, and I thought that's weird.
So you mentioned you have a con coming up. Do you have a lot of things to do with your career as an author coming up?
I mean, no, I mean, I'm probably going to do some small local events, but the big one is this one in Virginia in 2023, AuthorCon, which seems like one of the bigger things going now. It's I think there's a lot of overlap with folks in the books of horror community. It's a lot of those authors that you see in the books of horror group on Facebook. I think a lot of them are planning to be there. A lot of the people who read, who are readers and get recommendations from the books of horror community, I think they're going to be there in attendance. So it's going to be a really cool opportunity to meet a lot of these people who've just been names on a screen. I can't wait, personally.
Cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah, that's a great segue into talking about the books of horror. The books of horror group on Facebook.
Mm-hmm.
They are amazing. I mean, I've been involved with them for a couple of years now. I guess I've been with that page for a couple of years. I lurked for many years before I ever, or for a long time before I ever wrote anything in there. But I have gotten so many recommendations for stuff that I may not have ever seen,
right?
Were it not for the books of horror.
Yeah, that's what's amazing about it. I mean, and it's everyone's so accessible. You know what I mean? You're talking to other authors. You're, as an author, readers can ask you for signed copies, or it's just a totally different sort of experience. And everyone's so awesome, so nice and supportive. On a lot of those groups, there's just a ton of negativity, but I don't really experience that all that much with the books of horror group. So
the admins do their job very well on the books of horror Facebook page. There's really not a lot of fighting.
No, and I mean, there's definitely people who have like different opinions, and people who, if there's one book everybody's talking about, there's definitely people who are comfortable, and I think that's a good thing, saying they didn't like X book, which is how it should be. Not everyone should it'd be kind of weird if everyone liked the same stuff all the time. So if you like horror, if you like indie horror, you're not going to see Stephen King on there, which is okay, but you're going to see a lot of indie horror authors who are, like I said, really accessible, and so it's really a cool group. Yeah, very supportive. Yeah,
and they're starting to get T-shirts and stuff like that made up of. I have to get a couple of those for us. Oh, yeah. They're just really cool.
It'll be great to have for next year when Horror Mayhem pulls around.
Yeah, our group, or our channel we're getting ready to come up with is not only going to be movies, we're going to do horror novels on there as well, horror books.
Yeah.
And it's mostly going to be independent movies, independent horror novels, that kind of stuff. So because I have discovered that I am enjoying. I am enjoying.
Nothing wrong there, Declan. No.
I am enjoying the independent books more than I am the mainstream books right now.
I am too. Yeah, it's you almost can you feel the passion that went into it. I love seeing a person, talking with a person, and then reading their book. It's a totally different experience than walking into some book chain and picking a book off the shelf. And to be honest, you go into any of those chains, the horror sections are pathetic. There's just
there's 4 shelves of horror books, and 3 of them are Stephen King.
3 years, yeah. And I love Stephen King, so it's not. I mean, but there's so many great writers out there who lack exposure, and so it now is, as I said before, it's sort of this renaissance for people who like to write the scary stuff, and people who like to read the scary stuff. It's reminiscent of probably what it was like in the 80s, in Stephen King's heyday, but there's a lot of people, and it's not just a bunch of old white guys either. It's there's much more of a range of people who are who are putting stuff out nowadays, and it's really awesome to see.
Yes, and I'm glad to see that extreme horror is actually becoming a thing, because it's been written for a long time. Yeah. But it's never been really published by the major publishing companies.
Yeah, I mean, I have to be honest, I see a lot of that on books of horror, and I have myself not really read much in the extreme horror genre, but wow, does it have a following? There are people hungry for that.
I've read very little of it too, but I'm just glad that that someone who wants to have their voice known is able to get out there.
Yep.
There should be a place for that, and boy, that books of horror. That books of horror group is the perfect place for these authors.
People eating that stuff up. Yeah, it's cool to see. Yeah, I mean, and again, Pete, you're right. People who probably wouldn't have been able to be published, just because trad publishers tend to stay away from that sort of thing, right or wrong. It's great to see that they're having their due.
Yeah, I think so too, because I mean there are more than 20,000 members of the Books of Horror page.
Yeah,
and it is incredibly active. This group is like,
oh yeah,
I mean, there are hundreds of people on here that are just really active that we see post on a regular basis, and I'm glad that they let horror authors once or twice a week get on there and put their book on.
Yeah,
I think that's great.
Yeah, I think it's because a lot of these groups they don't want people posting their own stuff, but I think that's part of the charm of the Books of Horror group is that as long as you're not being spammy, you get once a week, as you said, you can get on there and put up a post about your book. So it's really great to be a part of.
Definitely.
Card carrying, Declan.
The Blue Man, what's Blue Man fan group?
I read alien romances, and they started with the Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. She's an independent author, published herself, who just absolutely exploded, and I'm never living it down.
Okay. I was thinking like Blue Man Group.
No, not that.
Well, I mean, what?
No, don't go there.
There's not that big.
There's a big difference. So we're well past the hour mark, and things are descending into madness. Thank you. So tell us how to find you. Where can we find your work?
So the easiest place would be anybody can find my work on Amazon. It's where all of my books, all 4 of them so far, are being sold in paperback and Kindle. If you really would be interested in like a signed copy, you can reach out directly to me. Find me haunting the Books of Horror group. I also have a website, www.tomreimerauthor.com, and also on Twitter, pretty active on Twitter at ReimerTom.
Okay. Do you do Instagram or?
I do have Instagram, and it's going to sound a little familiar to you. It's Bookish Reimer. Yep, that's me on Instagram. So
English nations of the world unite.
Yeah, not as active on Instagram. I never quite got the hang of it, and I'm not yet on Book Talk. I just haven't. There's so many different social medias I got going on. It's only so much you can manage and do a good job at. So
I'm not even sure what Book Talk is. I'm gonna have to look that up.
TikTok. Yep.
Oh, so, Book Talk. Yes. Book Talk. I don't do TikTok. There's nothing wrong with it. It just there is so much crap on there. You got to wade through to get to the good stuff.
Yeah, I cannot quite pull myself to do that just yet. But I hear there are a lot of people selling a lot of books on Book Talk.
Yeah. Well, I was at Books A Million and Barnes and Noble here not too long ago, and there was actually a table that said Book Talk, and there was a table that said Bookstagram.
That's a big deal.
It is. It's a huge deal. And I would like one day for there to be a table that says Booktube. So
You should start that. Get that.
Yeah,
going.
yeah. Maybe we can make that happen. Start with the horror stuff.
Absolutely. There's a rabid fan base. You can't go wrong with horror right now.
Yeah, you really
totally agree. And especially indie horror books like yours. They're amazing. I can't wait to see this kind of stuff in the big bookstores. I mean, Stephen King's going to be the biggest for the next 30 years.
Oh yeah.
You know, even after he dies. But that doesn't mean that we can't, because we are starting to see some indie stuff in bookstores.
Yeah, it's happening.
Like there's a book from a books of horror author that is starting to make it real big, and it's called Man, Fuck This House.
Oh, I have it. It's like behind me on the shelf, actually. Brian Asman.
Yep, and that's in Barnes and Noble. You know, that's in Barnes and Nobles all over the country. So
I've heard it's good. I haven't read it yet.
I haven't read it yet. I'm reading that after Elementals. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm wanting to read that as well. But yeah, and if anybody out there is looking for a good read, especially for this horror mayhem, grab Malevolent Nevers.
This book was tailor-made for this event.
Yeah, tailor-made.
What?
Awesome book.
I like that cover. I love it so much.
Yeah. The cover made us happy before we ever read the book. So
I was a Goosebumps fanatic when I was a kid. Loved Goosebumps. So yeah, I love that cover. I love it so much.
Thank you.
But yeah, go buy it. I mean, you can get it on Kindle for like $5. The paperback is affordable. Very affordable. Go get a copy.
And the paperback's pretty to look at.
Yeah.
Sure, it looked good on your shelf. Yeah.
Yeah, it would look great on a shelf. But we appreciate you coming by, and we would love to do this again. If you
absolutely, yeah.
Whenever you want, we're doing a horror movie thing too. So if you ever want to come by and talk about a horror movie and plug your books there, feel free. Okay, yeah.
I'll talk about horror movies all day long. Yep.
Yeah.
Just tell me when.
Okay. Right. Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having me. This was a lot of fun.
It was great. Thank you for joining us. Really, we loved your book.
Yeah.
Cannot recommend it enough.
I'm so grateful, and I really appreciate you taking the time to let me talk a little bit about it today, and all the really kind things you've said about it. So thank you.
Yeah, well, we're gonna keep recommending it. So
thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Yep. All right.
And thank you everybody in the chat for joining us. We'll see everyone later. All right, have a good evening.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye, Tom.